was a great story.
That's gorgeous. But again, that's not really physical violence, is it? Is that form of harassment, you know, whether it's you walk into the, I was going to say newsroom, but the office, and there's a picture of Lara Bingle dressed in a little pink bikini on a motorbike. Is that sort of thing just, I wouldn't say as damaging, perhaps as physical violence, but how damaging is that? You know, the wolf whistles and the girls on bikinis on motorbikes and things.
You know, my own feeling on it is that when we think about most forms of physical violence, what we know is that unless it kills you, the physical wounds heal, but it's the emotional wounds which are the most long-lasting. And I think we tend to assume that, well, if it's just words, it's not as bad. Well, obviously on one level it's not as bad, but it can be so pernicious. I do a lot of training to end workplace harassment, and working with staff and managers, both to know the issues, but to figure out productive ways to deal with it. So it's not just all about, okay, we're going to take something to court or get someone fired or whatever, but how do you turn those moments into an educational moment so people can learn, so they can change, so they can grow. And what I hear over and over again from women and from men who experience harassment is it's shattering. I mean, you don't want to go to work. It's demoralizing. You live in fear of it. You start, you know, it can compromise safety. It is, as you were talking about, Andrew, it is serious.
And it does do violence to a person's integrity, whether or not there's some physical interaction involved. You cannot say, I mean, good old Anglo-Australian sort of thing of, you know, sticks and stones can break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Unfortunately, that's just simply wrong, because I think we're all aware that names can hurt, and that words do violence to people and do attack their integrity. It's not too much to say that in a workplace or in a community or wherever, where harassment and bullying or you know, bending others to your will involuntarily is acceptable, that violence is never very far away, and it's always in a bullying situation. It's always implied anyway, and that violence may be done to your person, but it also may be done to your employment or to your family in other ways by making sure that if you don't bend to that other person's will, or the organisation's will in some instances, that you've then got the capacity for people to lose their livelihoods, and it's just as devastating as being actually physically assaulted, and in some cases more devastating.
And especially too, I would imagine, Panya, if it was a male against a female, because then there are all sorts of, you know, sexual connotations in that kind of harassment as well, aren't there?
Sorry, I could not get your question.
Sorry?
Excuse me, your question again, please.
The question, I was just sort of trying to get your opinion really of, you know, we were talking about in the workplace that maybe not physical violence, but words can do just as much damage sometimes and be just as threatening, and especially if they're coming from a male towards a female. Would you agree with that?
No, we consider like verbal abuse or harassment is also one of the violence. It's like it can affect you mentally. Like we also, like in our organization, we also have the policy. If any kind of this behavior happen, we will not tolerate to that. Yeah, we will take action because we encourage people to respect one another. Yeah. It's not just about physical violence, but mentally violence is also harm people. And in our law, though law to protect women and not just women, men and women from in domestic. It's also considered like three: physical, mental, and also economic as a violence. Yeah.
How does what impact is the economy? Can you explain that one for us?
For example, a family, usually especially in the rural area, women depend a lot more to the husband who earn the money, and the money earned, they expect that women is the man, like need to take care of the money and also need to save the money, and women does not have a decision making on how to use the money for the big stuff for home. Yeah. Women can spend for like food or school for the children, that's small amount, and at the same time, women need to be like considering saving as much as possible as well. Yeah.
So it's just a different form of control, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Michael, can you give us an example of how violence against women affects the whole community? How does it ripple through society, and what effect does it have on the community?
Well, perhaps the greatest way is the impact on children. All the research tells us very clearly that when children witness violence against those they love, when they, and it'd be, you know, more often against their mom than their dad, but it could be either way, the impact on the children, particularly when they're young, is as if it's happening against them. And we know now from the research that that these early traumas of witnessing violence affects the development of kids' brains. Because what's happening is that there's a huge release of hormones such as cortisol, which actually impede brain development. So kids who are abused or experience witness high levels of violence, their brain literally doesn't develop as well. So they're carrying with them, you know, enormous hurt, rage, fear, and that you know, just from the start, talk about an impact on the community. If children in whatever we might, you know, guess, you know, 1 in 10 households in Australia are being exposed to that, that in itself has a huge impact on the community. You referred at the beginning to the economic costs. I mean, you know, as a taxpayer, I can think of better things to do with billions of dollars a year. I think there's so many different levels. I mean, just the fact that women have to think about, you know, their mobility. You know, sometimes if I'm speaking to a group and you know, there's some sort of people who are skeptical about sort of women's safety, I'll just ask, you know, could every woman here who's ever sort of thought twice about going out at night to the library, or to take a course at night, or to go to the corner store, whatever you call them here, the store to get milk. If you've ever thought twice about doing it, if you've ever thought twice if you're going on a first date to tell a friend who you're going out with, you know, could all those women stand up? Of course, all the women will stand up. Then I'll ask the men the same thing, and men don't have to think about those things. So if we restrict women's mobility, if we restrict women's safety, whether in the home or on the streets, that has a huge impact on the community.
And I guess, Andrew, that flows right through the workplace.
Well, the issues often around the workplace are ones of safety, but also an expectation of safety. It's relatively easy to guard machinery. A lot of employers don't do it, unfortunately, and as a result, workers are injured. But it is much less easy to guard against bullying and harassment. And you know, you can have as many policies as you like. If you don't have a culture that says that it is unacceptable to bully and harass other workers, especially women, and if you don't recognise that women in a workplace can be especially susceptible to bullying and harassment, then employers are failing and unions are failing to recognise the reality of the workplace, that you have to have that culture. If you don't have the culture, and as I said, you can have as many policies as you like, which say nice things. And I reflect on my own union's experience again. We had all these nice words about you know, an injury to one is an injury to all, but we didn't actually have ways in which we could protect women from that sort of harassment. We now do, and even though we had to go through a fairly traumatic time to do it, and I wish we hadn't, that I think we are strengthened by it, because it means that we then, as a union, can you know, don't want to trot out too many cliches, but we've got to walk the walk, and if we can walk the walk, then we can do so more effectively in the workplace and also in the community.
Okay. A UN study in 2006 on violence against women indicated that at least 89 countries had some legislative provisions that address domestic violence, and 60 had specific domestic violence laws. Are we seeing improvements as a result of these types of laws being introduced? Michael?
I think we are. I mean, I think you know, those laws come out of social movements. The reason we have those laws is because of the women's movement. So it's, you know, where the beginning, you know, just like as you were saying, Panya, you're working in rural areas. So that could lead to legal changes. It could lead to the police taking more seriously. But then you would ask, well, where did it start? Did it start with the police, or did it start with the work that you're doing? And I would say, well, it starts with the work that you're doing. But I think we're seeing changes. One of the interesting things we're seeing in many countries is that reporting rates are going up. The reporting rates here in Australia of domestic violence against women in the home, have soared. If you look at, do you call them DVO, domestic violence orders, is that what's referred to? Have gone up 10 times or something in the past 20 years. I think I'm very bad at stats, but I read something like that. And so you think, wow, the problem has gotten way worse. But my guess is actually it's because awareness has gotten much higher, and more women feel ready, and there's more support from their family or from friends to step forward, to call the police. And probably in spite of whatever limitations in terms of police action, more police are taking it seriously, which then gives encouragement for women to come forward, or there's more shelters. So, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm hopelessly naive, but I actually do think we're seeing improvements.